Hi everyone, this is Pepri. In this video, I'm going to talk about device onboarding. If you have worked with Microsoft Defender Pro Endpoint or MD even a little bit, you have probably heard the term onboarding many times. MD has been around for quite a while, and in the field, many people describe it simply as MD equals EDR. But the reason I'm covering onboarding in this video is not only because of MD. The bigger reason is that I want to explain device onboarding as a foundation for understanding Endpoint DLP. Endpoint DLP, Microsoft Purview feature. However, for Endpoint DLP to work on actual endpoint devices, those devices must be onboarded based on Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So if we want to understand Endpoint DLP properly, we first need to understand the structure of MD onboarding. If you look at the Microsoft Run document for Endpoint DLP, it says from the beginning that device onboarding is required. To understand why, let's first at the overall concept of Microsoft Defender. In a Microsoft 365 E5 security environment, Defender mainly protects four areas: email, cloud apps, devices, identity. The way I understand Defender XDR is this. It collects signals from multiple security areas, gather logs, analyze relationships between those logs, and then help us respond. So Defender XDR is not just a collection of separate security products. It is a system that brings signal from different areas together, analyze them as one flows, and supports detection and response. Email, cloud apps, and Enter ID protection are already cloud-based resources. For example, Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, and Microsoft Enter ID run inside the Microsoft 365 cloud. Because of that, signals and logs can be collected through service-to-service integration. In many cases, we do not need to install something separately on the client just to collect those cloud signals. But devices are different. Windows 11 clients and Windows Server operating systems are not cloud resources. They are endpoints that exist in the actual user environment. So to collect security signals from those devices, we need a process that connects the device to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. That process is called device onboarding. Defender for Identity also follows a similar idea. The related environment must be onboarded first, and then signals can be collected. So to summarize, the core flow of Defender is first, collect signals. Second, gather logs. Third, analyze the relationship between those logs. And finally, detect and respond. Endpoint DLP is also part of Microsoft Purview, but it needs endpoint-side signals because it has to detect and control user activities such as file usage, copying, upload, M usage, and other data movement activities on the endpoint. That is why Endpoint DLP requires device onboarding. And that is why we need to understand the MD onboarding before we go deeper into Endpoint DLP. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint and Endpoint DLP may look like they belong to different portals and different management areas. MD is in the Defender area. Endpoint DLP is in the Purview area. But from an endpoint perspective, they are closely connected. In practice, I think it is easier to understand it this way. MD collects endpoint security signals and works as EDR. Endpoint DLP detects and controls data leakage activities on endpoint. Both features require device onboarding to work on actual devices, and endpoint DLP can be understood as running on top of the MD onboarding foundation. So, before configuring endpoint DLP, the device must first be onboarded to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. In this video, I will walk through the basic onboarding flow step by step. If you look at the MD onboarding documentation, there are several steps such as preparing for deployment, assigning nodes, and checking the environment. But in real projects, the first thing we usually need to check is the type of environment. For example, a cloud-native environment where devices are managed mainly through Microsoft Entra ID and Intune. A co-management environment where configuration manager and Intune are used together. Or an on-premises environment where Active Directory and Group Policy are still the main management tools. In this video, I will explain the flow using two main onboarding concepts. The first one is Intune onboarding. This means the device is enrolled into Intune first, and then it can be onboarded to Defender through Intune policies. The second one is MD onboarding. In my terminology, this means group policy-based onboarding, where the Microsoft Defender for onboarding script is deployed through AD group policy. This is a method that results in a managed by MD type of management flow instead of managed by Intune. So throughout this video, I will use these two expressions. Intune onboarding means Intune enrollment and Intune-based management. MD onboarding means group policy-based onboarding to Defender for Endpoint, especially for devices that are not enrolled into Intune. Let me explain the test environment I'm using in this video. Active Directory is already configured. AD objects are synchronized to Microsoft Entra ID through Entra ID Connect. Devices can be configured as hybrid joined devices. Intune is configured from scratch in a new test tenant. And after that, I will go through both Intune onboarding and MD onboarding. One important point here is that this. Just because a device object is synchronized to Entra ID, it does not mean that the device is registered in Intune. Entra ID Connect simply synchronizes object. It can create or synchronize a device object in Entra ID. But that does not mean the device is being managed by Intune. And it also does not mean that endpoint security signals are being collected. So we need to separate these two concepts. A device registered in Entra ID means the device object exists in Entra ID. A device enrolled in Intune means the device is registered as an MDM managed device. In real environment, you may see devices in Entra ID, but not in Intune. In that case, the device has not completed Intune MD enrollment yet. Now, let's start with the Intune enrollment. First, we need to configure the basic Intune enrollment settings in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. In the Entra Admin Center, go to Mobility and then Microsoft Intune. Here we configure the MDM user scope. In this test environment, I will set it to all. To enroll Active Directory joined device into Intune, we can use group policy. A simple way to explain this is we are applying a policy to AD joined Windows devices that say you are already joined to Active Directory, but you also need to register with Intune. In this example, I have an OU in Active Directory. Inside that OU, I have an AD joined PC. Now, I will create a GPO so that this device can be automatically enrolled into Intune. On the domain controller, open Group Policy Management, create a new GPO on the target OU. Then open the GPO editor and go to Computer Configuration, Policies, Administrative Templates, Window Components, and MDM. In this location, open the setting. Enable automatic MDM enrollment using default Azure AD credentials. Change it to enable. For the credential type, select user credential. Once the policy is applied successfully, you can check the enrollment status in Windows settings, go to Accounts, Access Work or Schools. If the device registers successfully, you will see information showing that the device is managed by your company or organization. So even though we did not manually perform Enter ID join on this device, we were able to confirm that the AD joined device was successfully enrolled into Intune. And as we saw in the Intune Admin Center, the device is now shown as managed by Intune. If we look at this from the architecture diagram, the device that was previously visible only in Enter ID can now also be confirmed in Intune. I labeled it as a device object in the diagram, but at this point, you can understand it as a device that is now managed through Intune as well. As many of you probably already know, even without Active Directory, you can register a device into Intune by going through the Enter ID join process. I think most of you are already familiar with this part, so I won't explain it separately. I'll just leave it in the video as a quick walkthrough. To summarize what we have covered so far, Intune enrollment is one of the steps in the overall Intune onboarding process. In this video, we looked at two ways to perform Intune enrollment. The first method was enrollment through AD group policy. The second method was direct enrollment through the Enter ID join process. The architecture diagram shown here explains this overall flow. Now that we have covered Intune enrollment, let's move to the depender side. We will cover the process of registering or onboarding the devices that are already enrolled in Intune into the MD area. In other words, we will now configure these Intune enrolled devices so that they can be onboarded to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. To configure Defender, go to the Microsoft Defender portal. Then go to System and Settings. In a new test tenant, the Defender XDR workspace may not be provisioned yet. If that is the case, you need to provision the Defender environment first. Provisioning is required only once, and it may take some time to complete. You can think of this as preparing the Defender backend workspace. This is separate from the Enter ID Admin Center or the Intune Admin Center. Once Defender XDR provisioning is complete, we need to connect Intune with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Up to this point, we register the device into Intune. Now we configure the service-to-service connection between Intune and Defender for Endpoint. In the Microsoft Defender portal, go to Endpoint, General, Advanced Features, Microsoft Intune connection. Change the value to on and save it. When this setting is enabled, Intune and Defender for Endpoint are connected. After that, Intune can retrieve Defender for Endpoint onboarding packages automatically or deploy EDR policies. After enabling Microsoft Intune connection in the Defender portal, check the connection status in the Intune Admin Center. Once the connection is complete, you can configure which platforms should be integrated with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. One important point here is that this connection setting is for the integration between Defender and Intune. It is not the same as the actual EDR onboarding policy deployment. The actual onboarding policy is what makes Windows devices send signals to Defender for Endpoint. You can also understand the integration setting as creating the connection path for onboarding, as shown in the diagram. Now we need to onboard actual Windows devices to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint through Intune. Create a new policy for platform select Windows, for profile select endpoint detection and response. In the configuration settings, select the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Client Configuration Package type. If the connection between Intune and Defender for Endpoint is working correctly, you can select Auto from Connector. Auto from Connector means Intune automatically retrieves the latest onboarding packages from Defender for Endpoint. So you do not need to manually download and upload the onboarding package from the Defender portal. Configure the settings as shown on the screen. Assign the target group that the policy will apply to, and then complete the configuration. Auto from connector is the recommended option when Intune and Defender for Endpoint are properly connected. The benefits are simple. Intune automatically retrieves the latest onboarding package. Manual package download is not required. The latest onboarding configuration can be used when creating the EDR policy, and the policy can be deployed to Intune managed devices. If Intune and Defender for Endpoint are not connected, or if you are working in a special environment, you can use a manual onboarding package. But for a typical Intune-based deployment, Auto from connector is simpler. Because the devices have been onboarded, we can see that information from each device is being collected. Even without explaining this theoretically, we can easily distinguish whether each device is an AD joined device or an Entra ID joined device. As the policy is assigned, you can check the onboarding status in the Intune Admin Center. You can also check whether the device appears in the Microsoft Defender portal. At this point, the device follows the managed by Intune flow. So this is what I call Intune onboarding. Now let's move to second flow. This is a part I call MD onboarding. Earlier we looked at Intune enrollment and Intune-based EDR onboarding. That flow creates devices that are managed through Intune. But here, MD onboarding means something different. In this video, when I say MD onboarding, I mean the device is not enrolled into Intune. Instead, the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint onboarding package is deployed through group policy. And the device connects directly to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Because these devices are not MDM enrolled into Intune, their management state is not managed by Intune. Instead, they can be understood as managed by MDE. So this is the key distinction. Intune onboarding means the device is enrolled in Intune and managed by Intune. MDE onboarding means the device is onboarded to Defender for Endpoint through group policy and managed through the MDE channel. Not every environment can immediately use Intune. Many organizations still run on Active Directory, and in some special environments, it may be difficult to deploy Intune enrollment policies. For example, the device is AD joined. Intune MDN enrollment has not been applied or cannot be applied. The organization still maintain a GPO-based management model. They want to onboard devices to depend upon endpoint quickly, or some servers and business network devices are difficult to enroll into Intune. In these cases, you can still deploy the Microsoft Depend upon endpoint onboarding packages through group policy without configuring Intune enrollment first. That is what I call MD onboarding. The flow rule like this. AD joined device, group policy, run the MD onboarding script, connect to the Microsoft Depend upon endpoint service. The device appears in the Defender portal, and then security settings can be managed in the Managed by MD state. First, download the onboarding package from the Microsoft Defender portal. After extracting the download file, you will find that it contains a script file. Now, open Group Policy Management console and create a new GPO. Edit the GPO and go to Computer Configuration, Preferences, Control Panel Settings, and Schedule Tasks. Create a new task. Immediate task, at least Windows 7. This type of task runs immediately on the target device when the GPO is applied. Change user or group. System, and then check the name. Run whether a user is logged on or not, and run with highest privileges. Next, go to the Actions tab and add a new action. 4. Program script. Enter the UNC part of the onboarding script. For group policy to run the script, the target device must be able to access the script file. So we need a shared path. After onboarding is completed, check whether the device appears in the Microsoft Defender portal. You can also check the onboarding status in the registry. You can also check the onboarding records in Event Viewer. In the current diagram, the flow is shown up to Intune MDM onboarding. Now, I'll slightly adjust the structure and include MD onboarding in the diagram as well. Now, let's talk about integration. MD onboarded devices can receive some endpoint security policies through Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Security Settings Management, even if they are not MDM enrolled into Intune. This is the important part of the managed by MD concept. This approach is useful for server devices, existing AD joined devices that are difficult to enroll into Intune, environments operated mainly with GPU, environment where you want to onboard to dependable endpoint first, and immediate stages before moving fully to Intune MDM management. To apply this integration, we need to check the enforcement scope in the Depend portal. Go to Settings, Endpoints, Configuration Management, and Enforcement Scope. By enabling this setting, devices that have been onboarded through MD can have their security settings managed from the Intune page. Once the integration is complete, you can confirm that the device is shown as managed by MDE in the Intune Admin Center as shown on the screen. Finally, to summarize, even if a device is onboarded to MD first, you can still manage its security policy from Intune. Because I tried to cover the onboarding topic all at once, it may have felt a little complex. But once you organize this concept clearly, I believe it will help you understand the overall Microsoft 365 E5 security world much better. If this was helpful, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Thank you for watching.